People keep saying to me that Volkswagen are going bust. Are they? I will talk about that today with some facts, my opinions, and give you some information which many people don't seem to know, which is actually huge in the motor industry at the moment. You tell me that nobody is buying new anymore. People can't sell vehicles. The prices are too high. VW should never have partnered with Ford. Well, let's discuss these topics. Volkswagen have a rich history in motor vehicles. The people's car is now a cult hero, and the subsequent Type 2 has helped shape our outdoor lifestyle into what it is today. It is an aspect of this rich history that plays a big part what will be the future of this brand. Let's talk about what's happening now. We know that we are currently in an uncertain economical climate, which has been brought about by many factors. And I will say here that a lot of these events and issues are things that have affected lots of other brands as well, which I'm going to explain. Like, who would have thought that we'd ever see a potential merger between Nissan, Honda and Mitsubishi? Some of these factors have created a knock-on effect, a snowball effect, worsening the situation. These are in no order, but let's quickly give a few of them a mention. The supply chain posed huge problems. Firstly, with semiconductors, the chips were difficult to obtain for a few reasons. The increase in demand for computers, with many people working from home due to the pandemic, and also the rise of cryptocurrency miners, that created pressure on the supply. As demand grew, supply became scarce, due to, but not limited to, fires at factories, a drought in Taiwan which closed factories there, the trade war between USA and China, and a severe storm in Texas which closed factories, halting the production. The parts supply also became a problem. New vehicles couldn't have certain options. Some manufacturers could only supply one key with the vehicles. Wiring looms were in short supply, and that wasn't just complete looms. It was smaller wiring, like connecting the lights, which is pretty important. An event that was Volkswagen specific was the Felicity Ace, that cargo ship that sank whilst carrying 4,000 Volkswagen vehicles. This included some irreplaceable cars which couldn't be rebuilt. I don't know the cost to the company, but even if they had insurance to cover it, it would still have cost them. And that's nearly 4,000 extra vehicles which they needed to replace, making them again. Utilities, including gas and electric, rose rapidly, as did the transportation costs. Inflation really started to hit the motor industry hard, very hard. These problems created drastically increased costs that had already been rising due to the changing landscape of vehicles, the push for new technologies, namely electric vehicles, the investment into research and development, batteries, and also the premises to actually build the new vehicles. The capital expenditure which was required for all that was escalating due to the inflationary increases. So with all these increases, what would make things worse? Well, if there was a reduction in demand, that would be a bit of a problem. And with economical uncertainty, people are cautious. People think more carefully about the purchases which they're going to make. Has that actually happened though? We will see in a moment when we're going to have a look at some figures. The cost of vehicles has increased quite rapidly. Look at the price of the new Transporter. Although it is still cheaper than the Ford Transit, which I've discussed before, it is still much higher than it was 5 years ago. Vehicles aren't alone in the price increases though, as we're aware in our daily purchases. Our daily shopping has also gone up, trips to the fuel station. But we notice these vehicles more due to the fact that they're much bigger spend, albeit less frequently. In the UK, a very interesting statistic is 91% of cars are bought by using some kind of finance. So with interest rates rising, that can deter people even further from buying. Although I have recently seen some fantastic finance deals, quite favourable, including 0% on some models. Now, over recent years, a huge factor to influence the European market is the growth of Chinese manufactured vehicles. Now, this topic alone could be an own video, but today I'm just going to keep it simple. The Chinese government supports key industries, and the automotive industry is one of them. And this gives significant benefits to the manufacturer, reducing their costs, enabling them to sell vehicles at a much lower price. So when they're actually exporting them, there's been tariffs which have been imposed on these Chinese branded vehicles going into these other countries. These tariffs vary, but USA have imposed a 100% tariff just to make sure that they can protect the American manufacturers, meaning the American manufacturers can still be competitive. The tariff on the UK and Europe is much lower, but it does inflate the vehicle price quite significantly. According to The Guardian, research by Spanish bank BBVA shows that to buy a Chinese car in Europe can be twice as much as it is in China. BYD's entry-level Dolphin is £10,900 in China, whereas here it's £30,000. And there's also an increasing number of Chinese brands coming into Europe, all competing for that share of the market. And you might be thinking, why on earth am I talking about China? Well, for one, they are taking a share of some of the vehicles which are over here, but also it's because the number of vehicles that are actually exported into China has reduced, as their own branded vehicles have become more popular for the Chinese market. And this has led to a 9.5% decline in sales to China for the Volkswagen Group in 2024. I'll give you some more figures shortly. So people are saying to me, VW are going bust, they're shutting factories, they're doing this and they're doing that. Well, what happens in any business when times get tough? Our personal lives even. We've got to look at costs and expenses, make cutbacks, efficiencies, reduce the spending where we can. Things can become difficult with the cutbacks which we may need to make. We really don't want to make them, but to secure our future, we need to take tough decisions, choices that may make the present rather uncomfortable, or let's not beat about the bush here, actually quite painful. You might have wanted to go on holiday, you're touring Europe in your campervan this year, or maybe that luxury trip to Barbados, but you've not got the money, so you can only afford a trip to the Lake District, or perhaps you can't actually afford anything at all. We have to make sacrifices to ensure that we survive, we don't go hungry, or even worse still, we don't go bankrupt. And that's exactly what Volkswagen are doing, making changes to secure a successful, sustainable future. They are reducing the overcapacity, reducing labour costs, restructuring production to ensure that they've got stability. Job cuts, pay cuts, they are being looked into. Streamlining production, and we know that the Transporter will now be made in Turkey alongside the Ford Transit Custom. The ID Buzz and the Multivan will continue to be built in Germany in the Hanover plant. So for the die-hard VW owners, the original microbus, the Splitty, still has its descendants built in Germany, the modern microbus and the new California. Both of these modern vans, of course, being far better for the environment. Now, at present, there is this tremendous pressure from governments to hit the EV targets. The mandated figures they're required to hit, the target which increases each year until that ban for petrol and diesel vehicles comes into force, which is now 2030, which isn't far away. If they don't hit these targets, then they are penalised. So it's absolutely critical that they do so. Maybe the EV topic is one for another day. But all this development comes at a great cost, and it's better shared with other professionals. There definitely are going to be some radical changes over the next few years. And if you don't understand the Ford and the Volkswagen Alliance, then some of these potential partnerships to come with other brands may be really difficult to comprehend. The sharing of research, development, technologies and platforms is a huge benefit for everybody. How much more would a new van cost if they didn't do this? I don't actually know, but would it even be economically viable for them to build a new internal combustion van with the significant resources being put into EV development? These brands aren't selling out. They're evolving to survive in a drastically changing landscape. The increased competition, rising costs, and then being forced down the electric route leaves little choice. The 2024 figures have just been reported, and the Volkswagen Group sales were 9.03 million, which was a 2.3% reduction. As I mentioned earlier, there was a 9.5% reduction in China, but you can see here where other areas actually grew. Let's specifically look at the Volkswagen commercial vehicles. You can see the figures show a slight reduction for the year of 0.3%. Interestingly though, after the third quarter, they were up 3.6%. So is this something to do with the fact that stock was low? I know that campervan manufacturers weren't able to get hold of the base vans of the transporters. It's going to be really interesting to see how sales go this year. You may have seen in my last video the new transporter is available to order, so let's see how this does this year. The first deliveries are expected in April. So the comment that nothing is selling, no one is buying new vehicles. The SMMT has just published the yearly figures, and car registrations were up 2.6%. Now, regarding vans, we don't have any specific campervan figures. That's extremely difficult to report accurately. But vans of up to 3.5 tonne were up 3%. Now, these could obviously be used for anything, fleet vans, builders, businesses, etc. But for those who are saying that vans aren't selling, this just shows there that they are. So while we're here though, these figures do show the top models of vans under 3.5 tonne. And this further demonstrates what I've said before, included in my last video, about if something is produced in large quantities, they are naturally going to be talked about more often, whether that is good or bad. People say that the Ford Transit Custom is bad. It's the worst van ever. So why do people buy it? You can see here that it's sold way more than the Transporter, and it's actually in the two top slots, the Ford Transit Custom and the Ford Transit. Although I think that these figures might change with the new Transporter being cheaper, actually having that longer warranty, 5-year warranty with 5-year servicing and breakdown. Time is going to tell. Anyway, are Volkswagen going bust? Well, it's highly unlikely that the Volkswagen Group will go bust in the foreseeable future. Yes, there are challenges, but these are being confronted, and they have a plan to concentrate in the right areas to make sure that they can reduce those costs where possible. And as seen in the figures, they have a global presence, a wide portfolio of brands under their umbrella. Let's not forget that Volkswagen also includes other brands, including Porsche, Audi, Skoda, Lamborghini, Bentley, Seat, Cupra, Bugatti, Ducati, MAN, Scania. Probably missed somebody out, but each of these brands is extremely strong in their own right. They also own significant assets with the buildings and the land, and they've also got big investments in other companies. I did mention earlier that history plays an important factor, and part of this is the fact that they were historically owned by the West German government and the state of Lower Saxony. That was until the 1960s. It was then denationalised, but is still part owned by the state of Lower Saxony, which have significant voting rights. I think it's 20%. And with that, and the fact that Volkswagen are a major employer and contributor to the German economy, it's highly unlikely that if times really did get desperate, that the government just wouldn't do anything. The government would likely step in. So Volkswagen are a huge company trading in a difficult market, but they've got all the tools to get through it. I personally think that they're really well placed, and like I've said, with all those brands, they've got various different outlets and it's all over the world. So although China might be reducing, South America and other areas are on the increase. The new Transporters order books are now open, and I know that people are buying them and several converters are buying them in large numbers, so it isn't going to be long before we see them. There won't be the NEC show, which will be going to next month, but there's certainly pretty sure there will be some at the October show. Anyway, if you didn't see the video where I showed that the new Transporters here, you can see that here. Or some amazing VW Transporters, you can see those here. Thanks for watching, take care, and I hope to see you soon.